Why does my family always have one child go missing at age 16? My cousin Ethan's bedroom door was still covered in his basketball posters when I found the phone hidden behind the baseboard. I was 15 years and 11 months old, exactly 3 weeks from my 16th birthday, and I'd been sleeping in his old room at my grandparents' estate since my parents died in a car accident the previous year. The phone was an old flip model from 2019, and when I charged it, it powered on to show 17 unread text messages. Every single one was from Ethan, sent in the 3 days before he disappeared 2 years ago. The messages got more desperate each day. First message said he needed help, that Grandpa Richard was planning something and he had to get out. The last message, sent at 2:47 in the morning on the day he vanished, just said, "If you find this, don't trust anyone in the family. Get out before you turn 16. I'd been living with my grandparents for 8 months since the accident that killed both my parents. The grief counselor said I was doing remarkably well, but what she didn't know was that I'd gone completely numb inside. I was just existing, letting my grandparents make every decision because I couldn't make any myself. They'd enrolled me in a private school, bought me new clothes, set me up in Ethan's old room, and told me repeatedly how lucky I was. My grandmother Helen was always baking and asking about homework, and Grandpa Richard took me to expensive dinners where he'd talk about family legacy. They seemed like the perfect grieving grandparents, and I'd been grateful even though something about the house always felt wrong. Ethan had been their grandson too, the son of my Uncle David, who lived in Seattle now. Ethan disappeared during a family vacation to the lake house 2 years ago when he was 16. The official story was that he went for a late night swim and drowned, but they never found his body. The family held a memorial service with an empty casket, and Uncle David moved to Seattle 3 months later, cutting off contact with most of the family. I thought that was just his way of dealing with grief. But now, holding Ethan's hidden phone, I started wondering if he knew something. I scrolled through the other messages and found text to someone named Julian. The messages talked about getting the proof and making them pay for what they did to Aunt Rebecca. I'd never heard anyone mention an Aunt Rebecca. When I brought it up casually at dinner, asking if we had any relatives named Rebecca, my grandmother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. She exchanged a look with Grandpa Richard that lasted maybe 2 seconds, and in that moment, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Then Grandma Helen smiled and said Rebecca was Richard's sister, who died in a car accident 30 years ago, way before I was born, and we didn't talk about her because it upset Grandpa. The way she said it felt rehearsed. Grandpa Richard changed the subject to my upcoming birthday, asking what I wanted to do to celebrate turning 16. He said it was a special milestone, and we should do something memorable. That night, I searched through old family photos in the attic, looking for any pictures of Rebecca. I found a few from the 1980s, showing a teenage girl with dark hair standing next to a young Richard. On the back of one photo, someone had written, "Rebecca, 15 inches in faded blue ink." On another from a year later, last photo before she left, not died, left. I kept digging and found more inconsistencies. There was a memorial program for someone named Thomas Garrett, Richard's nephew, who apparently died at 16 in 1995. Another memorial program for a girl named Claire Garrett, who died at 16 in 2003. A newspaper clipping about a missing teenager named Marcus Garrett from 2011, who disappeared while hiking. Every single one was 16 years old. I started making a list on my phone, documenting every death or disappearance in the family archives. The pattern went back 4 generations, with at least one teenager disappearing or dying at exactly 16 years old every few years. Sometimes there were gaps of 5 or 6 years, but the age was always the same. 16. Always 16. The causes varied. Drowning, hiking accidents, car crashes, house fires, running away. But they all happened within days of the kid's 16th birthday. And in every case, Richard was somehow connected. I counted 13 names, including Ethan. 13 kids from the same extended family, all dead or missing at 16, across 40 years. My birthday was in 3 weeks. I was sleeping in the room of a cousin who'd tried to warn someone before he disappeared. And my grandparents were asking what special plans I wanted with smiles that suddenly seemed less comforting and more calculating. I needed to talk to someone, but I didn't know who to trust. Ethan's messages said not to trust anyone in the family. And looking at this list of dead teenagers, I understood why. I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? That I found a pattern of deaths in old photos? That my dead cousin left cryptic messages on a hidden phone? They'd think I was a traumatized kid making up conspiracy theories. I decided to reach out to Uncle David, figuring he might know something about Ethan's disappearance. I found his number in my grandmother's address book and called from a gas station payphone 2 miles from the house, using quarters from my allowance. He answered on the 4th ring, and when I identified myself, there was a long pause. His voice sounded rough, like he'd been drinking, and he asked why I was calling from a payphone. I told him I found Ethan's phone with messages about running away, and I needed to know what really happened at the lake house. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up, but then he said, "Get out of that house, Owen, right now. Full story is linked below or on my channel."